Hello, Andy. Hi, Andy. You're just on mute at the moment, so
How you doing?
it's lovely to see you again. And
Good. How are you?
yeah, not bad, not bad. It's you've been fantastically busy, even in the sort of couple of years that we've had in the pandemic. I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to catch up with you at another time myself, talk about Lancaster, but today's very much about the students. And obviously, they're really excited the chance to meet you. I'm going to hand over to them very shortly to let them introduce themselves and get into that quite long list of questions. But thanks so much for letting us record this as well. That's really appreciated.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So over to you, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi Andy, thank you very much for doing an interview with us. My name's Bobby Jo, I'm a film student.
My name's Molly, I'm also a film student.
And I'm James, I'm a history student.
Oh, fantastic. Nice to meet you guys.
We don't know how much you know about Cut 2, but it's basically a film journal that our lovely lecturer Bruce put together. And the students run it, and every term we try and put out a journal where people, like, it doesn't have to be film students, anyone can submit reviews or essays, and we like to get an interview in there with people like yourself so that we can give some insight on, like, the film world, I guess. So we're hopefully going to get your interview in the next one. Yeah, okay, so we're all right to jump into the questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, bro. So, my first question is, what inspired you to study visual arts and theatre at Lancaster University?
Well, there are two things really. I was looking for a visual arts course. I was very much into painting and graphics, and it seemed to be very strong at Lancaster University. And as soon as I came up to look at the place, I fell in love with it really. But also the second motive was very much to do with my love for the Lake District and mountaineering. So it sort of it was a happy coincidence that that those two things were, like, it was literally the best visual arts course that I'd seen, and it was near the place where I really wanted to spend a lot of time. But I had no intentions of doing theatre at all when I came to Lancaster. And I actually didn't realize, I was so focused on the art and painting and graphics, I'd neglected to realize you had to do a third course in the first year, and so I really had no idea. And then in the first week of being there, I realized that there was a really strong theatre studies department, and I literally started working down the other end of the spine at Pendle on the art course, but I increasingly spent more time up at the Nuffield Theatre working on projects. And at first it was sort of more along the lines of creating posters and working on the sets and so on, and then I started acting in some of the productions, and then by the end of the first year, I was offered this really great part in a play called Gotcha by Barry Keefe, and directed by a really excellent actor called Tony Bell, who is one of the alumni, of course, from Lancaster, and it was just this extraordinary experience of really understanding what it's like to fully immerse and walk in the shoes of another character. So that by the end of the first year made me decide to change my degree entirely. And so I fortunately that Lancaster, of course, did at the time when I was there, I'm not sure, I'm probably sure it's the same, but there's the module system where you can sort of build your own degree, independent studies. So I managed to really focus on all of the things that I wanted to study, both in the theatre, on the theatre side of things, and I constructed a degree which was called, I believe, independent studies in theatre design and movement, and so which were two things that were very, very interesting to me. And the physical nature of acting, even back then, was something that was something that I was very interested in, combined with using my visual arts skills and designing theatre sets and lighting, and that was one of the great things about the Nuffield Theatre and the theatre studies department was this you were just constantly in this creative environment and able to focus on different skills, from set building to performance to lighting to directing to even the media studies department was that end, and getting into short filmmaking. So it was a sort of a happy accident in many respects, although half of it was completely by design, going there because of the visual arts course and the mountains.
So once you left university, did you stay in contact with any of your university friends? Did you have any specific university kind of influence with, maybe that's within the arts community or not? Maybe you had a favourite lecturer or something that really inspired you once you went into your career?
Absolutely. So I'm still in touch with a number of friends, as my closest friends actually, from Lancaster University, who are also on the theatre studies course. Julie Batty being one, and Nicholas Murchie, both entered into. Julie works at the BBC, and she's worked on programmes like Desert Island Discs. Nick is an actor, and he's currently doing theatre. So they're two of my closest friends. And then Keith Sturgis and Margaret Eddershaw, who were the course, professors and leaders of the theatre studies department, I've kept in touch with, and over the years they followed my career, I guess. And then recently we re-engaged in another way. They've begun a charity, a schools charity for a school in South Sudan called the Iba School for Girls, and so I've become an ambassador for their project, which is basically providing a safe environment for girls. It's a girls' school set in the South Sudan, obviously, where there's been a lot of civil war, to educate and enable them to take positions of, hopefully take positions of control and power in government, and to find their way into the system, so that there are more young women who are empowered in that part of the world. So it's a really incredible charity. So yeah, we've kept in touch. My association with Lancaster has sort of, it's stayed on, and I've been back and visited the theatre, and I've actually been back and visited the university actually a little while back now. So yeah, I adore it, and it every time I drive up the M6, and if I'm heading up to the lakes, or of course my heart kind of sings every time I go past Williamson's Memorial and think of the open air productions, and it's just such a magical place. I've got such fun memories of it.
So who or what were the biggest influences within the beginning of your career? Did your degree help you with the technicalities of filmmaking?
It did, because it sort of, as I say, I had this opportunity of combining all of the things that interested me, which as I say was theatre design and movement, and at that time it was bringing together sort of physical skills and then having an opportunity to use at the Nuffield Theatre, which was such an amazing place and so progressive, and you could build any kind of auditorium you wanted. You could use any sort of audio visual techniques that were available at the time, and we really sort of pushed the boundaries there. So those were huge influences, and Keith Sturgis and Margaret Eddershaw also used to run us up to Edinburgh Festival every year at that time, and we actually ran a theatre called the Harriet Watt Theatre. So we were promoting and doing all of the building of the sets for those productions, and stage managing all of the other incoming productions, and that was just a remarkable kind of breeding ground for creativity. And we also had great teachers, Simon Jones, who came in, who was he was a lecturer, but he also was a playwright, and so it was really exciting to be able to work with someone of that caliber, who was both a brilliant lecturer and also a playwright and would write plays for us to perform. So it was, as I say, this is sort of the stepping stone from the Nuffield Theatre into working at the Dukes was a sort of seamless thing, really. But it was working with highly crafted and talented people who were, and there's nothing like learning on the job as well. You know, the playing of a character at night when you're investing in that character and trying to find new things about that character all the time, with every single performance. And Jonathan Petherbridge was a brilliant director for two reasons. One, he was a great theatre director, but he also had, his ethos was very much connected to the community and to the whole notion of theatre as providing a service. And I'm so fortunate that I think I started off with that in mind, because I think many actors in a sense don't understand why they act. It's a sort of thing that you do and you're called to do, or you feel the desire to do, but actually at a certain point you need to really decide what it is or why you want to do it, I think, anyway. And I was fortunate enough to, as I say, my first job in working with Jonathan Petherbridge, he instilled me with this notion of a sense of it's you are providing a service to the community. You are going out and researching a play or a character and bringing back the information and sharing that. And it's very much with a view to causing, minimal perhaps, but some change in thought perception in your audiences. And that's if you carry that with you as an actor or an artist, and I have, and it does fill you with a particular kind of purpose, and that I think has always fueled everything that I've done since. So huge influence in that respect, and that did come from the Nuffield as well, and from the ethos of the theatre studies department too.
How would you say your career as an actor has influenced your approach to directing?
Hugely. I mean, when you're working with other directors, there are hugely kind of, I mean, throughout the theatre experience, of course, I started off doing lots and lots of plays, and I started, after leaving the Duke's Playhouse, I went and worked in various theatres around the land, from Manchester Royal Exchange to Bolton Octagon to, big tours everywhere, to sort of ending up in London and working the main theatres there, and the Royal Court, home of new writing, West End, and you work with a whole range of different directors, theatre directors, who are obviously, theatre is about the spoken word and predominantly, whereas film and cinema obviously is more of a visual medium. But you begin to, the musculature you get as an actor from uncovering and deconstructing a text through rehearsal is hugely important, because you're really understanding how to deconstruct a play and to shape your performance through that, see the function of your character through that story. I think a lot of people who come into, say, screen work, actors who come into screen work without doing any theatre whatsoever, don't have the luxury of that. The idea of breaking down a play with other people in a room collectively and shaping that and being part of something which has a life cycle and a growth, and and you get the chance to every night to improve or change or augment the performance. You build up a very particular set of muscles, acting muscles, doing that, where you don't have that in film. You're working solo a lot of the time. It's what you bring to the table on the day for the performance, for the camera, and obviously for your other actors. But you'll be surprised, some actors don't necessarily engage with you in the same way that you do when you're working. The kind of the chemical reaction that you get from someone on stage is very pure and intense, and drama is what happens between people. But sometimes when you're working on film, you often get people who are actors who save their performances for when they're on camera, and there's some value in that. But it means that when they're not on camera and they're on the other side of camera and you're acting with them, the energy level drops and they're not quite as focused, and there are different skills in terms of screen acting and theatre acting, and with that, and different directors. So in theatre, as I say, on the whole, you get people who are very focused on text, and some are brilliant at staging. but equally some are stronger in areas than others. Equally with film, you get brilliant visionary directors who are not that good at communicating acting ideas to actors. And if you're in a very fortunate position, you get someone who's both, who is both a brilliant cinematic visionary who knows how to shape a scene and make the camera dance in concert with what the actor's doing. So I suppose, rather long-winded answer to your question, but I was very fortunate to, and I've been incredibly lucky to work with great film and theatre directors of all different kinds. And you sort of, you learn to pick up what you think is your tool bag. You pick up the tools that you think is going to be interesting for your, you're eventually going to have your own way of telling a story, whether it be on stage or whether it's a film or TV show. And that's the same process in acting as in directing. You're gathering. There are so many methods of acting, so many different ways of approaching a character. And I think it's true to say that I've always kept moving. I mean, I've got a set of principles around how I start to construct a character, but on the whole, you learn so much if you're open to it from what other people have to offer. And then when you go into directing, you're really taking on in film particularly, you're taking on a parental role, in the sense that your job in many respects is to create an atmosphere where everyone feels valued. So everyone's going to bring 150% to the table. And there are directors, again, there are film directors who don't do that and who want to own the whole thing, and they're quite megalomaniacal in a way, because they don't want to share what their vision of the story is. But I think the best directors, and what I've kind of learned, I think, from some of the best directors is part of your job is to get this 150% out of and really value what everyone's contribution is. Because sure as eggs are eggs, it's like, if you've got 12 strong voices in the room, you're going to have 12 great ideas. And if you're just singular about it and only want to stick to yours, I mean, the job, finally, you have to helm the film. You have to shape it. You have to take all the raw materials that everyone's giving you, and you have to make sure it's your singular kind of vision, in a sense, that's guiding all of that. Your guiding principles about the story that you're telling. But you have to get this balance right between, and that's the same with actors as well. They want to bring something to the table. They might have a strong idea about the character. It might not fit in with how you've imagined it, but you have to, everything's a kind of, it's this amorphous, creative melting pot of ideas that you have to then apply storytelling structure to. And that I love about directing. And that's, that is the most gratifying thing. And when you start out, I think you're a lot more, you think you have to own the whole thing. And actually, as you evolve as a director, I think good ones learn to delegate and trust. And that's, I mean, it's the same as any kind of management, really. It's trusting your workforce to do the best that they can and will bring their best game to the table.
How was your experience initially getting into the practical side of things? Do you have a way that you develop your iconic voices for your roles and things like that?
All sorts of different influences and stimuli, really. I mean, for that's what I mean. It's sort of, you have to remain open, and also with the people that you're working with, it's sort of chemically you change. You're never the same as well after a job. When you've been through the experience of playing a character, that character becomes, you've done something to your body and your mind and your soul to go on that journey to understand that character, and you can't forget that. That becomes part of you. You imbibe that. It's part of your emotional memory. It's part of your, the physically what you've done to your body to put yourself through the emotions of pain or anger or fear, or all of the range of emotions that you encounter with different characters. You build up different ways of accessing those, and And actually, when you're a younger actor, I think because you have less life experience, you have to do more work in a way. And then as you grow and you've been through pain and suffering or anger and betrayal or whatever it is, you learn to then, you can access those things a lot more easily, I suppose. But in terms of in terms of voices and finding characters, I mean, it can be anything from, I work a lot from music, from paintings, from research. I do a lot of research, reading around material, time, history, social hierarchy of a particular period, whatever it is, you bury yourself in that, both as a director and as an actor, obviously. I mean, as a director, you have to have such a huge knowledge of your subject matter. And there are projects that have been in development, that I've been developing as a director for, between 10 and 15 years, which is still yet to come to fruition. And the life cycle of making a film is immense. I mean, it really is, from first idea to, generally from first idea, and this is quick, from first idea to someone sitting in the cinema and watching a project that you've done, is about 7 years. So it's a life cycle, it's a proper life cycle, from script development to production design, to funding, to casting, to all of the components. But script writing does take 2 to 3 years and many drafts to get the script into a shape where actors will actually think it's decent enough to play the characters, or the production company thinks it's strong enough to a story to tell. I've sort of slightly gone off topic, but the point is, with characters, again, if you have if you're in rehearsal for a play, and I actually haven't been on stage for a long time. My last play was in 2002, the Royal Exchange in Manchester, Othello, and I've been so busy with film really ever since. And I'm desperate to go back on stage, but I've not, those particular muscles are kind of aching to get going again. But so in the film world, particularly because I spent a lot of time in the film world, you're doing a lot of self-motivating, a lot of self-driving, a lot of work on your own to build characters, and then then you can take it into a very short, limited, literally, because what you do in film is mostly you rehearse for about 5 minutes and then you start shooting. So you've got to have done all the tip of the iceberg that you may see on screen has it's miles deep of research and work and everything that you've gone, and then you've got to try and effortlessly internalize it and not kind of demonstrate everything. So it's a real journey, every single character, and that's the great thing about it, which keeps you going, is like every single job is so different, and you're scrutinizing the minutiae of the psychological aspect of a personality or a character, or the physicality of a character, and for anything from Caesar in Planet of the Apes to Gollum to playing Ian Brady, or I've just done a Luther film with Idris Elba, and I've been playing this rather psychotic character, and every single role is you feel like you've never done it before. You haven't ever done it before, and so it's consequently like starting from scratch every single time. I mean, you've got skills that you've built up over the years, but you don't want to fall back on traits or things that you don't want to get lazy and just sort of fall back on things so constantly you're challenging yourself to try and find a new avenue into a character.
And what would you say is your most difficult role today in terms of voice acting and performance?
So many difficult characters, but I think one of the most challenging actually was I played Ian Brady in a thing about Myra Hindley and Ian Brady called it was about Lord Longford, who had a relationship with Myra Hindley and tried to believe that there was a possibility that she could redeem herself he was quite a religious man, and Ian Brady was her accomplice, and they performed a series of horrendous child murders in the 60s, and that was I think one of the most difficult characters to actually find any common ground with, or empathy, or try and believe that I could embody that headspace and mindset, and believe that was my reality and normality. And that was hard. And I'll give an example. He said a very extraordinary thing, which was, he felt the most he ever felt validated in his life was standing on the moors with Myra Hindley, burying the children that they just performed horrific sex acts on. And that he said, by the moonlight, standing with her, he said, I've never felt so alive or so much love. And to get your head around that is quite extraordinary. And I was like, how do I even begin to engage with this? How do I even begin to contemplate that? And what I had to do was to think my way through, well, what is the thing that validates my life the most, and the most extraordinary experience of my life? And I think that was the witnessing the birth of my children and in our house, and and that kind of elevation and sense of emotion and place in the universe, and all of that kind of validation of being around, that was my version of that. So when I was playing that role, I was that was my thought process into it. So that was a hard role to play. And then what was the other one? What was my favorite director?
Yeah, who's your favorite director?
Oh, that's really unfair, and I have to be really careful what I say. Oh, look, I mean, obviously I've got a huge relationship with Peter Jackson. We've spent many years working together in all sorts of ways, and he's been a huge influence. But even before I started working with him, I adored his films. He made a film called Heavenly Creatures, which is an exceptional, beautiful film, which was also written by Fran Walsh, his partner. I think when I first met them, when we started doing Lord of the Rings, I just knew that we would not just be doing these projects together, because we just clicked in a very particular way. And obviously we went on a huge journey with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but then after that, almost immediately afterwards, or whilst we were still doing pickups for the Return of the King, the last movie, he asked me to play King Kong, and that was like a huge kind of epiphany, really, for me, because it was like, wow, I've played this 3.5-foot hobbit, and now he's asking me to play a 25-foot gorilla, and and using this technology. And it was like, wow, this is going to push the technology to the limits. But they always come from a sense of story and character and real and authenticity, and that they're forensic in their detail in all of the work that they do. For even though they're sort of fantasy projects, they're treated like historical projects. And in the same way that King Kong, which was based on the 1933 version of King Kong, there's a lot of research into the period, and also just the way that we wanted to approach the character of Kong himself. So that there was a springboard for many other projects. I worked with him then on Tintin after that, and then he asked me, we were then going back to make The Hobbit, and he asked me not only to reprise the role of Gollum, but to direct the second unit for the film, which was a big undertaking. So the second unit on a movie tends to shoot the big kind of action sequences, and he wanted me to do it because he knew that I was heading towards directing, and I directed short films which he'd seen, and he mentored me pretty much, and he knew that I was heading towards directing my first full-length film, and it was a relatively small film in comparison. And then he said, will you come and direct the second unit, which was like standing in front of my first day actually with a full crew, was standing in front of 250 people, shooting at 48 frames a second with 3D cameras, shooting on the biggest at that time production on the planet, and we shot for 200 days. So he gave me that opportunity to really learn my directing skills, and you know, I can't really express how much of a mentor he's been to me. You know, we continue to work together. In fact, I was back in New Zealand. They were only just over the borders. I was back there a couple of weeks ago because I'm writing something with Philippa Boyens, who is also one of the writers on Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series. But you know, I think he would have to be the person I'm closest to in terms of, and not only kind of in terms of, I think in terms of taste, because I love the way that he uses the camera and as I say, kind of creates a sense of movement and the way that he feeds off the actors' performances with the camera is quite something else.
I just want to know if you could explain a little bit the differences between motion capture and performance capture.
Well, so good question. When we started doing this, there was no facial capture. So it was literally more about motion capture. And motion capture came out of the medical industry, actually. It was a way of, first of all, it was the technology was used it came out of gait analysis. So if you had an injury, you know, they put markers on your ankle, or ankle, and they could track it so that they could see if it was broke, you know, if it was repairing itself and your gait was right. Then that was used in very, very early video games for capturing sports people, martial artists, and then it started literally when we were doing Lord of the Rings. And there was a film before that called Final Fantasy and also Polar Express. Around that time, those films were starting to use motion capture on the big screen, and this was the sort of, but it was motion capture because the difference is performance capture is basically. Well, a motion capture is you can put a dot on a tennis ball and roll it along the floor, and that would be capturing its motion. Or you could put dots on a dog, and it would be moving around, and then you're literally capturing its motion by triangulation, which are, you know, different cameras, the motion capture cameras, sending an infrared beam that coming off the reflective marker, and then triangulating that in space. So, and when you've got all of those dots, then you can start to make sense of movement. So that's a sort of quite a scientific thing, and you are literally capturing motion. But when we started to, and on the Lord of the Rings, that's what we did for Gollum. So my facial expressions, all of Gollum and Smeagol's facial expressions, and all of the acting and interacting between themselves and with the other actors, I was on set filming traditionally, and then I'd go back and have to reshoot. We'd always do a blank pass with me not in it, and then the other actors would have to act to a tennis ball on a stick, and then I would go back to the motion capture stage and then re-choreograph myself back into the empty plate version of the scene. More often than not, we actually used the shots that I'd been acting with them in camera if the three of us were all in the same shot, because of if there was a lot of heavy interaction, like materials being pulled, you know, there's a lot of grabbing or, you know, physical kind of interaction, you want to actually have that. So my performance was then, Gollum was painted on top of me, as it were. So at that time, it was just motion capture. When we did King Kong, which was the next film, as I mentioned, that I worked with Pete on, we then started to, or towards the end, actually, we started investigating the notion of doing some facial capture. And that was with tiny little markers on my face. And so that picks up all of your facial expressions. And then they build a facial rig. And then those dots are translated onto that digital facial rig. And so every time you put an expression, you know, it drives, you're driving a digital mask in effect. But that didn't happen until Kong, and even then it was very unwieldy, and it was a huge bank, an array of cameras, and I had to act all my physical scenes out using just motion capture, and then I had to do everything all over again. I spent 8 weeks just doing Kong by myself in the motion capture stage after we'd spent a year shooting it on the real sets. And then I'd have to redo the scenes again just for facial, or keep the movement down to a minimum so that all these cameras could pick up the 132 markers all over my face.
Do you carry anything with you from your first ever motion capture performance? Like with Gollum, is there anything that you still have with you today from that experience when you work with performance capture or motion capture?
Well, yeah, I was very fortunate. That the day that Peter Jackson asked me to do King Kong happened to be my birthday in 2003. It was an Easter weekend, and that very day they invited me over for lunch, and I went and had lunch with them, and he said, "We want you to play King Kong." And as I say, we were still doing pickups for Return of the King, and he gave me the actual ring that's in the two towers that Frodo carries, that we acted with, so that I have, and I'm not telling you where, but it's in a safe place. So I have that. That's very an important prop to have. So I think that probably answers that one. I have the ring.
So, is there one thing that stands out to you throughout your career on either side of the camera, in production, in acting, in directing? Is there one thing that stands out as a thing you are most proud of?
I mean, I loved playing. I loved playing. From an acting point of view, I really loved playing Ian Dury in Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. That was because he was a hero of mine when I was growing up, and I got to hang out with. I actually met him before I knew I was going to be playing him actually on a theatre piece that he was writing music for. But he was an extraordinary character, and then we got to know the family who were very influential on and helped us shape the script. And they opened up his sadly he died before he got to ever see it, but they opened up his lockup and gave me all his costumes to wear for the film, and kind of and just the whole process of sort of becoming him and getting into his headspace was an extraordinary thing. So that was absolutely one of the most pleasurable experiences. And then sort of on the directing front, I made a film called Breathe, which was the story of a person who in the 50s was. He caught polio and was destined to be in an iron lung for the rest of his life. And this is a true story, and it happens to be the story of my business partner, Jonathan Cavendish, who we run the Imaginarium together. And it's an incredible tale, because he was about to give up on life, and then his wife said, "What can I do to make things any better for you?" He was in an iron lung. He was about. Oh no, so he didn't. He wasn't actually in an iron lung, but he would have been in an iron lung for the rest of his life. But the doctor, luckily, when he came down with polio, he had a tracheostomy, and then he was on a ventilator. And he said, "Look, I don't want to live in hospital. And if you get me out of hospital," and they said, "Well, there's no way we can get you out of hospital because you'll die." "Well, I'll take that chance. And if you get me out of hospital, I'll live for as long as I can. And you'll just have to trust that we can make it work somehow." So they escaped. They literally escaped from hospital. This is in the 50s. And they had 25 years of him living on a ventilator at home, so he was like a real pioneer. He was doing something. It was like the equivalent of landing on the moon. No one had ever lived outside of the hospital system on a ventilator, and there are incredible scrapes that they got into, like when the electricity ran out, and they had to hand pump to keep him alive, and all this kind. I mean, it's a phenomenal kind of small but big story, and that was really because I know the people involved, and Jonathan, my business partner, is his son, and it's if you ever get a chance to see it, it's a really good tale.
And just to wrap up, just conscious of time, is there anything coming up in the near future that you're allowed to promote, that you'd like to promote?
Yes, I'm finally getting to make Animal Farm, which is we've been trying to make for, again, one of these projects that's taken 10 years to get off the ground. You know, in fact, when we first started the Imaginarium, that was the inaugural project. That was like, we're going to make Animal Farm, and that's what I mean about how long these things take to make. And you know, we've been through so many iterations of script and trying to find the right tone for it. How do you tell the story for now, make it resonate in the world that we're living in? Fortunately, it's sort of sadly, it's a story that's ever relevant. But it's a way of telling the story. And we have a particular angle on it, which I think is going to really engage audiences across, you know, from 8 to 80, really. But then it's finding the people that who want to make that movie with you and go on that journey with you. And finally, it's all coming together. We're working with this amazing company, CineSite, and yeah, in fact, we've been working on it for about a year, and it's animated. It's an animated movie, and but using facial capture, so all the animals will kind of be anthropomorphized in their faces, and then it's a hybrid of animation and facial capture. And we're just about to have completed the first, what we call animatic of the whole thing, which is a sort of very basic mixture of storyboards, Unreal video game engine, grey shaded models, blocking, and sort of, but anyway, we'll be able to see the whole story together for the first time this weekend. So it's gradually, you know, coming into being, and that is really exciting. And you know, hopefully this time next year you'll be going to see it in the cinema.
That's fantastic, and it's a great way to finish that sort of session. Andy, I'll be in trouble with Rose if we don't say goodbye now, but thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to see you again. I would love to get you up to Lancaster, you know that, to see the Nuffield and to see the Dukes. But it's always a pleasure, and thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today. Real privilege.
Absolute pleasure. It's lovely to see you, and lovely to meet you guys, and good luck with everything that you're aiming to do and setting out to do. It's an exciting time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andy.
Have a great day. Thanks for your time.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.